Hey, good morning, everybody. We're going to keep the conversation going. My name's Alisha Sweeney. I'm from Denver, Colorado, and it's been awesome. There's my Coloradans. It's been so awesome and inspiring to be at my very first music policy forum. And I'm so grateful to be on stage and the discussion that I'm about ready to have with someone that we can all thank for being the reason that we're all here today. So this morning we've talked about Seattle. We've pulled it back a little bit. We've talked about Washington. And now we are going to widen the lens and talk about the big picture and music communities. Again, thanks everyone for being here. It's so amazing that you've showed up. We're going to reflect on how far we've come over the last almost decade as the Music Policy Forum and how we can continue to engage and support our music communities. And I was thinking about it, who better to have a fireside chat with than the founder, Michael Bracy. Michael's a Washington, D.C. based advocate, strategist, and entrepreneur who works at the intersection of emerging technologies, culture, and public policy. And over the last 25 years, he's been working to connect the dots between policy and music, first as the co-founder of the Future of Music Coalition, and since 2017, the Music Policy Forum. He's represented or advised a wide range of public agencies and nonprofits, including Colorado Creative Industries, which I love, American Ballet Theater, NPR, Fractured Atlas, Cities of Albuquerque and Boise, International Documentary Association, and many others. He teaches the Music Industry Seminar at Georgetown University, has been a co-owner of Mizra Records, look him up, since 1998. Give it up for Michael Bracy. Oh, hi. Michael, how's it feel to have the spotlight on you right now?
Awful.
Well, maybe we'll make it a little bit better. Let's just imagine, you know what they say. Well, let's get started. I know, right? We're moving on. So, Michael, first of all, one thing that we were talking about yesterday during our breakout sessions a little bit was that life of like analog versus digital. And like you've been in this for the last 25 years. I've also been on the radio for 25 years since I was a teenager as well. Let's talk about that bridge between the analog and digital. You have so much knowledge to share. How has the lived experience of this last quarter of a century related to the younger generation asserting leadership to build what makes sense for everyone moving forward?
Thanks, Alisha. It's so great to be here, particularly in this space.
Yeah.
And so great to see, we've got folks from all over the country have come in to learn about Seattle and share their own experiences. And it's just a real honor. I think, that whole question of how do we sort of think about the sort of structural transition in the music community from an analog and a physical sort of community and economy into this sort of digital space is really one of the driving questions of our era, and really trying to understand what were the decision points that were made at different sort of eras in the 90s, especially as sort of digital technology came online.
Yeah.
That helped sort of establish the structures that we're living under. And then now, as we have the first generation of young people who have grown up with a fundamentally different relationship to music because of digital technology, how do we apply those lessons from the past and put them into a modern context? So that's a lot of what we think about and are working on, and it's complicated, obviously. I mean, all stuff is complicated, but we'll probably drill more on that in the next few minutes.
Yeah, I was really inspired over the last couple of days, and even just on the first panel this morning, to hear the young local music host for KEXP talk about, I want music journalism to come back. I want people to be writing about local artists and really that focus on community. So I was just thinking, like, I like those analog things too. Well, let's keep talking, music versus sports. This is a concept that I hadn't thought a lot about, but I remember you talking about something called a Jimbo index, as some concept that you came up with. So music versus sports, why do they exist? What role do they play in our society? How are the economics shifting, like sports versus music, becoming a luxury good? People, spend a lot of money on sports, And people do with music, but why is sports trump everything?
So I'm going to talk for the next 45 minutes about music and sports. No,
I'll watch the time, guys. Don't worry.
Right. I think so part of, again, what's fun about being old is, having that sort of horizon to kind of think about how things have shifted. And I think there's a really interesting analogy in my lifetime between what happened in the music industry and what's happening in sports. And one of the sort of major factors in the music community that a lot of folks here lived in and know very well is we started to see in the 80s and 90s a sort of end of music companies and music businesses as they got more and more subsumed into sort of, widget companies, right? And sort of publicly traded corporations that saw an opportunity to increase shareholder value through their participation in music. But it really was not necessarily the sort of old school music companies. And that could have been, again, at the label side, it could have been, obviously, as most people in this room know, Live Nation is a billboard company, right? Clear Channel started as a billboard company that got into radio because they saw that as an opportunity to, find more eyes and sell more advertising, right? And sports and music have had sort of a very parallel sort of evolution in terms of the economics of those industries over my lifetime. It used to be you could go to a ball game, for $25 or whatever. You used to be able to go to a show for $12, whatever. All that stuff, the accessibility to that experience. And I think there are two things that I'm really interested in right now related to music and sport. Well, three things. One is, and we talked about, thank you for flagging the Jimbo Index, which was my big thing from our Boise conference. But basically is the sort of, we think about our values as a society and we think about access to capital and the challenges that musicians have in terms of making this all work, from a lifestyle basis. I thought that was really brought out very well in the first session. We make different choices as a society in terms of where we want to put money and what are things that we in this country historically don't do versus what the rest of the world does. And a lot of that is, again, resources for artists and in terms of touring grants and all the rest of that stuff. So again, we've made a choice in this country that public universities will fire their football coach and still pay their salary, right? And like to tune of, I think, $104 million last time, for 1 year, last time we did the math. So you see things in terms of those choices. But what we're seeing in music, or something I'm concerned about or curious about, is as sports conglomerates are getting more into the music industry side of things in terms of live performance, we're starting to see the parallels in terms of the live experience becoming more of a spectacle for younger people particularly, right? So we're talking about folks who are spending, $300 to go see the Jelly Roll and, I forget who Jelly Roll's touring with. Oh, Post Malone, right. That would be, for a lot of younger fans, that's their thing they're looking for, right? They're going to go spend the $300. Well, if they're figuring out how to spend $300 to go to that big event, which is a spectacle, which they're going to love, and it's going to be where they are, they may not have that $15, $20 that we used to have to go out to see a local club, right? The economics of it don't really work. But the other thing that I've been thinking a lot about in terms of music and policy and where we are right now in this moment, we collectively have been part of a economic system and a cultural and political system that has monetized our antagonism at such a high degree, right? So the entire political system, the entire social media system, the entire traditional media system, really figured out that we can monetize and scale basically othering others and figuring out what is the next outrage, and there are teams and there's winners and there's losers. And that even extends its way to sports, right? So we think about going to these sporting events, which are fun and expensive and exciting, and the parallels between great athletes and great musicians. There's a lot of the same endorphin rush, and there's a lot of the same respect for the craft and sort of acknowledging that something special is happening that can be incredibly inspiring, or frustrating or whatever.
Yeah.
But in sports, by definition, we have winners and losers, and we don't like the other team, and we don't like the other team's fans. And sometimes we go home happy, and a lot of times we go home really mad. But when you get 6,000 people at a rock show, we're all on the same team. We're all feeling that sense of joy and togetherness. And I think from a policy standpoint, I would like more policymakers to understand this is a leverage point we have that is underutilized right now in terms of these activation opportunities to make it easier, especially for younger people, to get into these rooms, to have that sort of lived experience of being in a common space around something that should be affordable and accessible, to bring that kind of common joy instead of, again, being like, I hate your team, the refs suck. And by the way, for any of you who are parents of anyone, older than 15, 16, the sort of ubiquitous nature of sports gambling as that fits into all the rest of it is something I don't think as a society we're even starting to kind of get our head around. So I think about, again, we talk structurally about all the challenges in our ecosystem, and so much of it is the vulnerability of the independent venue and independent festival sector, that they provide such a critical role, and they're so important, and we all acknowledge that. We talk about the ladder of venues. We talk about, the community spaces like this. I mean, they're all the things that this room knows and lives. What we have an opportunity to, it's not that we haven't done it, but I think where the opportunity is to connect that dot then even further on the policy conversation, again, about like, what are the opportunities to shore up the economics of this vulnerable sector by recognizing that we need to get people into these rooms. Because again, we went to these rooms
right
because we were bored.
Yeah.
Kids aren't bored.
No.
They're not looking for stuff to do. They've got plenty to do.
They got plenty to do without even getting their butt out of the chair.
Right.
How do we do this though? How do we get the kids to actually get there?
I don't know. Why are you asking me? No.
You're the expert.
Hey, I'm not the expert. I just have the mic for a few minutes. No, I think so obviously we're in a very disruptive time, right? So this conference is timed at a very interesting point because we are sort of narrowing in on very hyper-specific issues and opportunities that interest this, kind of cross-section of music stakeholders. And we also know we're living in a broader context of geopolitical stuff that we're sort of spending 3 days going deep, right? So the geopolitical stuff, we're not going to talk about a lot right now.
Right.
But what we can harken back to, and a lot of folks at this conference have been at previous versions of MPF, there has been a lot of work done over the last couple of decades that is sort of documenting and understanding that music, again, is not a commodity or should not be thought of as just an entertainment form, right? We're not shouldn't be competing against video games or sports or other stuff. The science is documenting the role of music in terms of public health and of empathy and of, again, community and inspiration and things to look forward to. And again, when we recognize that the economic structure is for the business structure that's trying to reach people to bring them in needs to evolve, or is it not capturing generationally both sides of the spectrum, right? We're not getting the younger audiences that we once would have had, and we're not getting the older audience who have kind of aged out of the community. Mm-hmm. So the opportunities, I think, from a policy standpoint, is looking at both those sort of demographics and saying, are they not at shows because they don't want to be at shows, or are they not at shows because they've lost the connective tissue that would let them know what's happening, right? One of the reasons we're here is because the role that KXP does, Alisha does in Denver, India 102.3, the connective tissue that public media or alternative weeklies or the platforms historically played to get the word out, to let people know they're there. We're losing in most communities a lot of that infrastructure.
Yeah.
So again, from a policy standpoint, if you say there's a public good to shore up the ecosystem by getting more people into these rooms and putting more money into that and paying artists more and all the rest of that, but there also is the public health conversation about it is good for the soul, right? It's good for the community. Then we have an opportunity, I think, to have different conversations about what do activation dollars look like, right? And there are a lot of conversations that people in this room are leading that basically are saying, we put money into traditional infrastructure or public art or sometimes into spaces. We don't put as much money into activations that are putting dollars into, again, getting people into these places or supporting these festivals.
That totally resonates with me, and I'm sure a lot of people here in the audience. I want to talk about that public and private a little bit more, like understanding and filling in the gaps in private sector through public and philanthropic initiatives. What are some of your thoughts about that?
Well, again, this is the whole concept of an ecosystem, is the interdependent nature of all of these different components that have to work well in support of musicians and in support of fans. And typically, in the best possible case, I think, I mean, we can have different opinion in this, but I think you would like this to all be in the private sector. You'd like there to be music businesses that are able to be that gap that is servicing the connection point between artists and fans, and it all could work, again, through private enterprise to kind of like succeed and thrive. And we could have more local independent record labels. Again, the venue system would be going well. There'd be all the digital platforms. I mean, that would be the goal. The reality is that really doesn't happen, right? We don't have private enterprise in this country that's able to thrive at the necessary level to really be that resource that musicians need and be that connection point to those fans. And so again, one of the reasons we're here is a thriving, sort of music ecosystem. So we talk about KEXP, right? The mission evolution of KEXP away from being a radio station into being, no, we are a nonprofit that serves to basically connect artists with audiences. And we do that through a radio station, but we also do that through a global stream. We do that through community activation events like the work that's happening this week with KEXP's partnership. We do through a whole host of activities because we see that there are gaps in the ecosystem that we can align with and help shore up. So whether it's KEXP, whether it's Vera Project, whether it's, so many different organizations here. On the nonprofit side, obviously Vera is such a great example, and we're so kind to host us yesterday, that are saying there's sort of a gap that we can come in and help support. Then the challenge for government is to say, well, we shouldn't just rely on the nonprofit sector to figure this stuff out, right? So government needs to be there either through policy or through funding. And a big thing, again, we all have been working on for 3 decades is how do we realign some of that public investment, public funding into what is really going to be most helpful for these ecosystems. At the same time, obviously, again, this audience knows this very well, we're living in a macro environment where our federal government for the last 40 years has basically taken a pass on antitrust, right? So you're dealing in an environment in the music community where their dominant structures are publicly traded corporations who, again, only exist. They have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize shareholder value for their shareholders, right? That's literally what they do. And they do that through whatever means is necessary to try to extract value or money out of these things. So it's 2 fundamentally different models. And what we need to do, I hope we can continue to do, is understand where the nonprofit sector has seen a need or small businesses are trying to, make a go of it. Government needs to recognize they are dealing in a fundamentally unfair business environment for, companies that mostly are looking to extract value to maximize shareholder value. So whether that's the label side or the broadcaster side or the live entertainment side. So government needs to understand that and understand where their resources, where the policy can be shoring up those music businesses, those local businesses and nonprofits, so they're not just carrying the entire weight on their backs, because that is not sustainable.
I just want to... what's inspired you this week? Popping around to sessions that were happening yesterday with all these incredible delegates across 14 states that are visiting. What has been inspiring you that you heard ideas from?
Well, I mean, obviously it's the growth of the community, right? Yeah. It's the idea of, I've always... I was unbelievably lucky to my wife and I spent our formative years as a married couple in this town. And so, we moved here in 1991. We started a bunch of stuff. We left in 1998 when it was over. No, but we were able to, have our formative years as music fans and being part of a community and sort of immerse ourselves in a remarkable time and a remarkable place. And that has informed the work that we've done, all this policy work, for the last 30 years. And to see the through line, of all the people coming to Seattle, all the people in this region coming out to the Vera Project for yesterday's conference, people being here, I've always felt that music is it's hard to make black and white statements, but I felt in general in music, there are extractors and there are builders. Mm-hmm. There are people who look at music because they see it as a hustle or a business or a way to sort of make stuff happen for them. And they're big parts of our scenes and, that's fine. But what's always interested us are the people that are coming together with curiosity and passion because they internally understand why music matters and why this stuff matters. And that there's never, ever going to be a 5-point plan, right? It's not simple. This stuff is super duper complicated. But if you can create these spaces, both in person and virtually, where you have musicians, music workers, music businesses, nonprofits, academics, fans, journalists. I mean, if you get the cross-section of the community together to workshop and share these ideas, and then for us, the joy for Dina and Kate and Danny and Hakeem and Anna, who's not able to be with us for our board, the reason we do this is literally to see those moments where it's like, you need to talk to you. You have not met this person yet. And just know that the ideas and the movement that's going to be catalyzed from that is going to be so far beyond our imagination, right? I mean, this is all about kind of collaborative workshopping of where we can take what's working, what's not working, and build and moving and scale it, and replicate it, move it forward. So that's the inspiring thing. It's just people coming and spending 3 days doing this, especially when it's 70 degrees outside in Seattle.
I can't wait to bring back some ideas that I've learned over the last few days from people and just meeting some folks from Alaska and hearing what they think is a missing need. And like in Denver, we have, similar to Seattle, like an incredibly collaborative music scene. We have a robust, a lot of people feeling supported, a lot of dollars get put into the music industry. We have some great music venues and everything. What's the vibe in DC for you guys? Whether that's looking at politics or just musical vibe in DC for you right now?
Jaden Daniels, you guys watch this guy? I mean, we got the quarterback of the future. No.
This is not a sports side chat.
Did you see Ovi got the record? No. It's interesting, right? I mean, I grew up in DC. I'm a DC kid, and I have a very romantic notion about what that place is, right? Mm-hmm. It's a place where people come together and they try to make policy. They try to lead the country. And obviously, we're in a very disruptive moment.
Wow.
It's a very complicated and for many people a very scary time, and things are happening that are unprecedented, and we're all trying to navigate that in real time. What also is happening in DC is that many people made a life choice early on, and they said, I want to be in public service. I want to be a government worker. And so just in terms of literally the neighborhood aspect of DC, the sort of cruelty and capricious nature of what's been happening is uprooting so many lives, and just it's kind of crazy, right? It's really been a little bit of a horror show to kind of live through, just in terms of the human aspect of, as flawed as DC and our government always has been and probably always will be, the people who are in the trenches trying to make it work are some of the best people ever.
Yeah.
And most of them are not political, right? Most of the government employees that are at our agencies or at the National Endowment for the Arts or at CPB or at NEH or at HHS or at the Veterans Administration. I mean, all these folks, again, sign up for duty, and they sign an oath, right? They sign an oath to the Constitution to go in and do this work. And they do it, and they understand that they are going to be making less money than their peers. They are, not going to have all the entrepreneurial adventures that a lot of us get to have. They are signing up for a career service, and they've had the role, kind of rug pulled out, and it's not good.
Yeah.
Not good.
I am one of those people in Denver, Colorado,
Yep.
in public radio. As we can have this conversation for a very long time, obviously, but we're going to wrap up. But I thought we should wrap up with, what can we learn from the kids?
Kids, they got it. They got it. So, I didn't take the area. So this is what's exciting to me, right? And I think most people in this room have had a version of this experience. And again, if you think about, sort of the intergenerational aspect of the older heads, the older people that have been doing this, and how we sort of integrate in with the next generation. Again, the experience of being a music fan from my generation, again, we talked analog.
Yep.
It was a very analog experience. It was, I would listen to DC 101. I would hear a song I liked. I would walk to the bookstore. I would read the music magazines. I would read reviews. I would walk to Record Works, and I'd buy some records, right? And it was a very sort of intentional, tactile, but a very limited experience, right? Because there were, you had to buy things. You had to do the time. The internet did not exist, right? All this stuff. We now have the first generation of young people, if they are fortunate enough to have the economic power to have access to the digital technologies that are available, they have grown up with the entire recorded history of digital music on their phone, on demand, in their pocket, whenever they want it. And what I'm seeing is a generation, and it's probably a 25 and younger, who are growing up with a deeper appreciation and more passion for music than ever before. And they're there. And so all the structural economic challenges of the streaming marketplace, which totally need to be like rethought and all that, the sheer notion that we have moved beyond a music industry that was based on, industry marketing to consumers into a bottom-up active collaborative environment where everybody can have all their superfan bands, right? You go to Treefort, everybody's got a Treefort band that they love that no one else has ever heard of, right? And it's because technology has unleashed the opportunity, again, not to be consumers they're being marketed to, but to be active participants that can be sharing, not file sharing, but be sharing their passion for this. So it's exciting. And I think the two things that I think about all the time, one is, again, which we work very hard at, and I hope we do a good job at, but is the intergenerational transition of power that basically says the mistake of 25 years ago is we had, people my age and older making policy decisions that were impacting people who are 30 and younger, right? So we need to not do that as we move to the next stage, particularly around AI and around sort of the next evolution of technology. So we need, the 30s and unders to understand that not only are they invited to the room, but they got to help put down those stakes to say, what is it that we need, that we want that's going to make sense for us? And it's our job as older people to say, or how do we then help shape that into sort of a coherent policy agenda that makes sense? And part of what we have to recognize here is the stuff that we celebrate in terms of technology, like KXP having the opportunity to have a global stream, you having a global stream, that was a policy choice, right? When internet radio was invented, there was no reason that internet radio all of a sudden could just happen, right? I mean, I'm pointing at a bunch of people in this room were there and they helped make it happen, right? So that was a choice and decision that worked. And also, by the way, created a new royalty for artists to get paid money when they were played on digital platforms. So part of it is, again, the younger folks understand they have a fundamentally different relationship to music, working to figure out what they need and how we can help build that. The other, and then I'll stop maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I could go Cory Booker into y'all. Is we have to be very honest, and we touched on this, but just put a fine point on it. What are the gaps in the ecosystem that the private sector is unlikely to be able to provide, and how does that get shored up? So cultural journalism. So the work that Alisha does in Denver is unbelievably vital, right? It is incredibly important to have people that are committed to a place, that understand it, that understand the history and the narrative, that are passionate about it, that can see who's coming next and be the platform to say, in a world of boundless content where there's too much fucking stuff, I need to know what Alisha's saying I should go see at UMS. So when I go to UMS and see 500 bands there, or however many bands are going to be at Underground Music Showcase, I have that confidence. So I had a beautiful experience last Saturday, again, and I'll wrap up here. Again, every time I'm on stage here, I'm always talking about Lucy fucking Dacus because I'm obsessed with, like, the Boy Genius folks.
Same.
And Lucy, so she did 2 sold-out nights at the Anthem, which, if you know, DC, 6,000 venue. Great show, great crowd, everybody's there. And on her set, hopefully you get to see her when she's on tour, she's got this beautiful set with these sort of images of sort of Renaissance paintings, and it looks like an art gallery. And about 2/3 of the way through the set, sorry, this is making me emotional. I don't know why this is making me emotional. She put up a artist image of Bob Boiling.
Oh,
Who, many of you know from NPR Music.
and he was there in the audience, right?
And Bob was there, and she talked about Lucy Dacus grew up in Richmond, Virginia, knew nobody, met Bob at DC9, one of our smaller ladder of venues. We're in 2016, and she was playing with Julian Baker, and it was Bob Boilen and others like KXP and Alisha championing these artists to help people like us know this is something we should pay attention to, right? And this is a type of infrastructure that we cannot take for granted that we're going to lose. So I don't know what the future version of, again, Alisha's work or of the Rocket, right? Charles Cross. I mean, we don't know what your generation is going to need. What I think we don't want is to say, we're just going to leave this to TikTok influencers who are going to figure out their own business model, and there's not going to be infrastructure that values this as a job, right? So these are the things that we need to look about, whether it's venues, whether it's festivals, whether it's cultural journalism, that we really need to be able to articulate, and this is what this community needs to be continuing to do, be able to articulate that to the policymakers so they understand, again, that if we don't have this ecosystem, this interconnected nature, it all is going to fall like a house of cards. So we got to put those resources and dollars and policy into making this stuff work.
I love that. And as we wrap, and we have a special performance up next from some kids, I believe. But I want to say to the young folks that I've met over the last few days, like I've been so inspired by you, and to feel that you want authenticity and a genuineness. And that making connections, like tangible connections instead of just a digital lifestyle. It just makes me think like the kids are all right, you know? And I am just so proud to be here. And thank you, everyone. We could continue this conversation for forever. We will keep it going. You guys have some live music coming in just a moment. Please put your hands together for Michael Bracy, the founder of Music Policy Forum, and Lucy Dacus fan.
Yeah.